I am Marwan Cameron. This is The Conduit. Thank you for joining me this evening. Uh, have a good show for you. Now, this show would have aired yesterday live, except that I was at the Bainbridge Island Museum of Art yesterday speaking for their Share, Learn, and Grow series. And I was honored to go and speak there. I believe that was the first one back in person as a hybrid. So, shout out to the Bainbridge Island Museum of Arts. And I want to say a special thank you to Kristen uh, Tollefson, the Director of Education, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Advancement, and also to Quincy Blackman, who's the AV technician out there. So I really appreciate all of their help and assistance and, the invitation. Do forgive me, I have COVID, so that is why I'm looking all glistening. I'm not feeling great. Uh, man, I went downhill really quick. I mean, yesterday I felt fine. And then around 2:30, I'm like, man, I don't feel so hot, as I was going to do the afternoon shows from Bainbridge Island. And I was like, man, I just don't feel good. So I canceled the show and got into the car. And, next thing you know, I got the chills. I got the heat full blast, the heated seats on. My windows are foggy. And I couldn't get warm enough. And it was like, what is going on? So I came home, got in the bed, fell asleep. I don't even know what time I woke up. Woke up whenever I woke up. And, I was like, well, I just got a bug or something. And, Shaylin was like, you need to take a COVID test. So she told me that today. So I was like, all right, I'll take the test. And I was like, oh, well, looks like I got COVID. Which, of course, at Layla's gymnastics competition out in Kent, I was sitting I was on the bleachers at the bottom of the bleachers. Parents who were sick and their kids were sick, coughing all over the place. And it's like, man, I can't get up. I can't move fast enough. And yeah, I know exactly where it came from. They were talking to another family, talking about how they were sick. And I was like, why would you bring yourself out here when you're sick like that? So, you do have to, keep yourself safe, even if others aren't going to help keep you safe. So I will definitely never have any judgment for anyone that chooses to wear a mask, for sure. And it's like 10 days before Christmas. So it really sucks for me because it's one of my favorite holidays. But that's neither here nor there. So anyway, I had the opportunity to speak and to give you some context a little bit. I was thinking about, okay, diversity, equity, inclusion. What are you going to talk about? There's so many different things that I could talk about. And in that, and the way this came about is the original person was not able to present. And so they reached out to me and said, hey, I can't be here for this. Would you be able to do it? Power off. And I said, yeah, I can make that happen. And so that's how I ended up speaking out at the Bainbridge Island Museum there. And, then I had to decide, okay, so what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to talk about? There's so many issues, so many different things you could talk about that fall under diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I said, there's some things I've been trying to work on over the past year that I have not been able to really put enough attention toward. And I said, you know what? 2023 is coming up, and I just gave advice to someone. And I told her, I said, do not wait for New Year's or an arbitrary date to make a change in your life. If you want to make a change, if you want to do something different, do it. If you've been planning it and you've been thinking about it for a while, then go ahead and do it. Why are you waiting for January 1st to make that change? Why are you waiting for your birthday to make that change? Just go ahead and do it. And so I was like, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to take my own advice and I'm going to go ahead and do it. Now, in that, me doing this, some folks ain't going to be too happy about it. And reason being is I don't get down like everyone else does. Let me go ahead and pause that there. I just came out of a meeting with Kids at Public Health, and there's a grant that is coming up here. And so there was some conversation about, what to do, how to go forward, be collaborative, all those good things. And I'm definitely a collaborative person, right? Even when folks aren't collaborative with me, I'm very collaborative. And, at the same time, what I want to tell folks is it's important for you to be collaborative, but it's also important for you to believe what you believe. And what I mean by that is, if you feel strongly about something and you are convicted by something, then, you owe it to yourself to see that through. And so often we don't do that for whatever the reasons are. And one of the big reasons that is we can be, what's the word? Bullied into going along with the group. And that's not a very safe space to be in. And if this group can cause you to not have access to resources or the community, then that's probably going to make you think twice about, jumping in there and being a contrarian, right? And I'm not saying to be a contrarian just to be a contrarian, right? There needs to be some logic and some reason behind it. And so, I just encourage you that you still have to remain an individual even while you're working with the collective. That's critical. So I encourage you to do that. I encourage everyone to do that. All right. So that being said, let's go ahead and jump into this. So this is my presentation for BIMA. If you want the documents, those documents will be available to you. Just send me an email and I'll show you how to do that. And I will email those to you. All right. So let's go ahead and get into it. Yeah, I thought I was untouchable. Like, man, I haven't been sick. I escaped. Everyone else around me is getting sick, and I'm not. Nope. That is so far away. Why, oh, why? Teachers call on students in the back.
You let me know when you're ready.
Oh, we can go.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. This is Kristen Ellison. I'm here with another Sherilyn Rowe. Thank you all for coming in person, and thank you to everybody who everyone's tuned in via Zoom. As you probably know, Share Learn Grow is an ongoing series that is one way that we are working together as a community of learners on equity issues. And we've had a little bit of a bumpy end of the year, from the middle of the year to the end of the year, with people not being able to show up and scheduling. And so I'm calling Marwan Cameron's visit with us today a kind of a debut or a restart. Want to welcome Marwan Cameron, and I also want to remind folks that we are on Suquamish land. This is the Aboriginal and current home of Suquamish people who have been stewarding this place and caretaking it since time immemorial. That's something I'd like you to think about wherever you are, and whenever you are gathering together as a group. Think about the reason that you are where you are and all the legacies that precede you. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Marwan in just a second, but I want to say that Marwan started off today by saying, Wednesdays are my busy day. And when you hear all the things that this person is engaged with, it is just staggering to think that one person has so many tendrils in the community. We're so fortunate to have you here, Marwan, because you are connected to so many different pieces of the greater Kitsap region, from justice, social justice, the library board. You run your own nonprofit. You have this podcast. I mean, you're connecting and communicating and helping people stay engaged in ways that we can only dream of. So thank you for letting us ride in the boat with you a little bit today. And I just want to say to everyone, Marwan has some handouts. We'll make those available can we send those to folks afterwards?
Absolutely.
So go ahead and use the chat to ask questions. We'll have a Q&A afterward. And I believe, are we hooked up to have people talk live on Zoom too?
They should be good to go now.
Okay.
Well, let's ask Becky to come off mute and just see if we can hear her. It's like, oh, Becky, Alex, like, no.
Becky, you're on the spot here.
Or Laura, or Ian. Anyone just want to come off mute so we can test that. Be awesome.
She's off mute.
This is a test. Becky, try to speak if you can. Your chat's working perfect. And if not, we can type in the chat also, so we'll make it happen. But I will give the output on that. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Thank you for the warm words. So my intent was to come on wearing a hoodie. And this is going to be quite an interesting conversation. I don't think many of you have had a conversation quite like this in the work that a lot of people are doing. So the actual handout, Kirsten, is here. If you wouldn't mind handing that out to folks in the room. And I will pull it up on the overheads for people to see. But we're going to get into the subversion of Black culture. The subversion of Black culture. A little bit about me. I was born in Buffalo, New York in January. Very snowy. Back then, if you weren't married, that was frowned upon. And so I went into homelessness immediately with my mother. She tried the best she could, stayed with some folks, stayed in some shelters, gave me up for adoption. I was in foster care till 5, was adopted from 5 to 14, went back to foster care. The last place I lived as a ward of the state was the YMCA downtown Seattle at 17, and I emancipated myself at that point. I didn't see any real reason to just stay. So that's a little bit about my history. I only have a 9th grade education. Got my GED 2 days after my 16th birthday. I was a brick mason. I actually built the Safeway and the Walmart in East Bremerton. Then I fell off the scaffold and destroyed my back. So I was like, degenerative disc joint disease. Actually, I have surgery next Friday. So it's actually easier for me to stand. And so I had to go and reinvent myself, which meant going to college. So I went to OC as a student back in '97 and didn't know in 2012 I would be an adjunct professor there, teaching business management, general studies, and many other things. I did that for about 5 years. I created some programming while I was at the college because there's a lot of non-traditional students like myself, a lot of homelessness at the college, folks taking baths in the bathrooms, sleeping on campus. And so I wanted to create a space for those students, right? There's something for Running Start, there's something for veterans, but there really isn't anything for a non-traditional student to stay there aside from funding, right? So I would do food in the classroom, Professor Spaghetti. I can't cook, but that's one of the things that I can make. And I would bring them to the class and serve 30 or 40 students and create potlucks. Because the issue is, this is where the resources are. So people come into class and then they leave immediately. It's like, but this is where all your resources are. So I did that for 5 years. And unfortunately, my niece was experiencing homelessness at that time. And the only way I'd be able to help her is if she came to OC and got directly into my program. So I needed to go bigger. So, created Gather Together, Grow Together will be 5 in February. Basically, think of us as a cab or an Uber for low-income and indigent folks. We have contracts with Kids Out Mental Health and several other folks. And we get people around. We're about half the price of an Uber. We do transport a lot of people here in Bainbridge Island to Seattle to specialist doctors' appointments, things like that, methadone clinics, you name it. So we do all these things. We also feed the unhoused. And what else do we do? Oh, start a podcast. So that's why you see this equipment here. As Kirsten was saying, on Wednesdays, I have a show at 1, which is why my normal setup isn't going right now. And then I do a weekly podcast with KCR and the Bremerton Housing Authority. And then in the evening, I'm covering city council meetings or the Olympic College board meetings or Central Kids Act board meetings. So you have this paper in front of you, The Subversion of Black Culture. And I'm just going to read this here. Let's go ahead and put this up for folks that are viewing. There's some things in the chat when I'm pulling that up. Are they good?
We're good.
All right. I like good. All right. Subversion. You are likely here today because you want to learn more about diversity, equity, and inclusion. You are likely fast becoming already experts in misogyny, black misogyny. Most of your viewpoints are through your black feminist female friends, white women, their male allies, and other BIPOC being left out there, right? Indigenous and people of color communities. This leads the narrative of the oppression of the black community. One of the reasons why I started the Conduit is to teach, to inform, and to educate, and to elevate the voices that don't often get elevated. So when we think about the patriarchy and dismantling white supremacists or white supremacy, somehow black men get roped into that. Now we go back to how we got here. I'm not going to put the images up because they're too hard to see. They don't show those things now, right? Transatlantic trade is what Texas schools now want to call it. But we were raped, we were murdered, we were chattel slaves. And so not only did black women go through that experience, but black men went through that experience also. When that ended and we went through Jim Crow and all the other things, yada, 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 somehow, again, black men have been lumped in to toxic masculinity. But I would submit to you, as we look at these things here, we're going to talk about the educational stats, about how our 4th grade boys, and there's some stats here for you after, aren't reading at level. Black boys, not the girls. Men experience homelessness more than any other group. There are very few, if any, emergency shelters or DV shelters for men. One of our workers at G2 worked with her and her 2 sons, great family. They were staying at George's house, women's shelter. The problem was her son turned 18 years old, and he's considered a man at 18. So they lost their housing because he had the audacity to have a birthday. Sweetest guy you want to know. Never been in trouble, great student, very polite, very southern demeanor, if you will. But he caused homelessness for his own family because he had a birthday. See, these are the things that aren't talked about. Now, there's something that I want to bring your attention to. Let me go ahead and flip this down. Go ahead and flip on the back. And one of the reasons for this is flat blackness. Just by a show of hands, how many of you have heard that term, flat blackness? You know what that is? All right. So what flat blackness is when you use some statistics to talk about an issue. Black men get killed by the police more than any other demographic. Okay? But then you say, hey, well, we've got to create these resources, justice. And somehow black men get left out of the mix. See, a lot of people love Black Lives Matter. I'm not one of those people. Because what it was designed to do, if you looked at the website in the very beginning, was to dismantle the traditional household. So while we need to be accepting of all forms of family, what it said was the traditional family was bad. Well, we already didn't have a place when you think about during the Section 8 times, when it was said, well, you know what? We can give you money, we can give you aid, but he can't be. See, the same thing is happening today. Think of the Black Panther movie. Black Panther 1, Black Panther 2. If you read the comics, and I am a big comic person, then you know the history of T'Challa. He was the 3rd smartest, and he could fight, right? Only Reed Richards and Iron Man were amongst the top 3. But that was subverted. And his sister became the smartest and constantly showed him up. Now what happened as a result of Black Panther was there was this big push for STEM. The problem was all the STEM went to black women. And if you Google now and say, hey, what opportunities exist for black men, you'll be hard-pressed to find. I challenge you to do it. For those of you that are on Zoom, look for some of those resources, some of those scholarships, some of those grants for STEM. That's what flat blackness is. Problematic. So what do we say? If we speak up, we get shut out. We get shut down. You've been in these spaces. Mansplaining. We're in cancel culture. It doesn't matter what side you're on. If you have a differing opinion, it is summarily dismissed. You're ostracized. We can't even have a dialogue or a discussion. Me-too-ism. What-aboutism. If we call out an issue that exists, what we get back is, well, men do it too. Well, what about this? What about that? We're not talking about that now. We're talking about this particular thing. We're constantly shut down. So that's caused a lot of us to retreat. Again, for many of you that are in these diversity spaces, you know that it is predominantly women that run these spaces. Why is that? Why is it? At the end, I want you to answer that question on why you think that is. Do we not stand up? Do we not speak out? Do we not march? We definitely die. There was a study that showed that black men were some of the most nurturing parents. I think that was from the CDC. I don't have that with me right now. Whoops. Go back in here. Some vocabulary that I wanted to share with you that I think that many of you have not heard. We're just going to go through it one by one. How many of you have heard the term ADOS? Okay. ADOS, African descendant of slaves. I do not identify as ADOS. Did I identify as African American? Elon Musk is African American, is he not? He's from South Africa. Don't think it's complete. I identify as FBA, Foundational Black American, which is an offshoot of ADOS. So ADOS was created, and then ADOS and FBA split, right? That's fundamental differences how they wanted to go forward and be represented. ADOS wanted to be more diaspora, inclusive, South America, see everywhere else. FBA was about foundational Black Americans here. So when you hear this reparations conversation, those things can be subverted by, well, what about Haitians? What about Jamaicans? What about Puerto Ricans? What about Mexicans? And should they get reparations? Sure, absolutely. But I'm a foundational Black American. My answers were brought here, not to South America. And this country owes reparations. So that's the separation there. Gynocracy is a big one. Anyone heard of gynocracy? Gynocentric? Have you heard of toxic feminism? Gynocracy. So the prevailing thought is that this is a patriarchy that we live in, that men run the world. In truth, if you look at our community, it is not the Black man that runs his community. It's really the Black woman. Big Mama's house. The athletes that you see, who do they thank first? I thank Mama. Where's Dad? Sure, men are in these positions of power, but they create laws that support and bolster women. And we'll look at that. So one of the last things that I'm going to share with you today is the Black male political agenda. There's more than 10,000 Black men who have signed on, and these are the things that we feel important as voters. Sure, security is important. The right to vote is important. But there's so many more things that we actually care about. And our voice does not get elevated. There was a campaign during this election that just passed. No voting, no fucking. Defeat. And if you look up that commercial, it's the most offensive thing that you've ever seen. And it was to appeal to Black men to get out the vote. And what it said was, you're hypersexual. So if you don't vote, you don't have access to sex. In the presidential election, they use strippers. That's how they were going to get the Black man out to vote, because we're hypersexualized. Tremendously offensive. What did Biden say? You're not Black if you don't vote Democrat. What does Kamala Harris say? I'm not going to do just something for Black people. I'm going to do something for all people. But every other demographic, whether it's LGBT, whether it's Hispanics or Asians or whatever other community, they can just advocate for themselves. They don't have to be all inclusive, but we do. And that's a problem. We can't say it, right? I'm Black and I'm proud has lost a lot of its mustard. Black male studies is not something that you see. There may be only 3 programs in the country that focuses on Black males. But if we're the ones that don't read at level, if we're the ones that aren't graduating, if we're the ones that are experiencing the school to prison pipeline, should the focus not be on our boys? But it's not. For those of you that are Twitter, Instagram, YouTube watchers, the Black manosphere, there are channels that are dedicated to, you can call it, the Black male perspective. And those things can get toxic at times, for sure. Because you're going to have good folks and bad folks and hurt folks and all that good stuff. But you have women's spaces too. I didn't put this word on there, but there's a word called divester. A divester is someone in the Black community that no longer wants to be with their counterpart. They don't want to be with the Black woman. They don't want to be with a Black man. And so there are these divester channels that exist on YouTube. And when you're in that space, you hear about it. You know what the Black women call us in these spaces? Bullet bags. That you need to abort your kid if it's a boy. Because a Black boy is horrible. It's terrible. That's coming from our Black women. So when we're in these diversity, equity, and inclusion spaces, and it's go queen, yes, absolutely. But there's a whole other part of Black culture that is not seen, that is not elevated. And we're very prideful people. So we don't want you to see that. We're not going to talk about that. Because if we're not on code, we're a Coon, we're a sellout. If we do so. Now, admittedly, Candace Owens is not my favorite person, and probably not yours either. But she speaks truth to some of the things that she says. But we're so sensitive that we can't take the truth and parse out the intent behind it. I can tell you it's raining, so you stay inside, and I go get the benefit because I left and I got the resource while you're inside. She can tell the truth, but because she has some undermined agenda, right-wing agenda, we just summarily dismiss it. Same thing with Kanye, or Ye. With Kanye, with Kyrie Irving, they took off their bank accounts, severed their partnerships. Who was the gentleman on the paper there next to Kanye who said that Sadie Hook was a myth? It's the anniversary. So our thoughts and prayers are with the families and the survivors of that tragedy. But Tucker Carlson and other far-right folks that say incendiary things, and have been saying these things for decades on platforms, they're still there making millions and millions and millions of dollars. I'm not going to argue whether what Kanye said was anti-Semitic or not. But there's some truth into what he was saying. But we can't look at that. Kyrie Irving simply posted, hey, there's a link to this movie. No commentary. You are now suspended indefinitely. You must atone. This is the modern day tarred and feathered. Amazon still sells it. They're not taking it down. There's no cancellation of Amazon. When you're looking for systemic or institutionalized racism, it's all around us. But we don't really acknowledge it. If we can't acknowledge it, we can't fix it. Why is it bad to be masculine? I have 2 daughters and 2 granddaughters. I didn't have any boys. That was not God's plan for me. I love all my babies. But boys, they're our warrior class. They're the protectors. the providers. Why is that bad? There are many that would dismantle the traditional family. Instead of saying, hey, other forms of family are okay. It doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. So however that looks, that's fine. But you don't need to dismantle the traditional family, which has been the pillar of the Black community. Many would say in the 50s and 60s, we were the most married, based on the statistics, right? And even during that hard time in America, we were thriving. It's a hot mess now. We were thriving. And if you're able to put yourself in a Black man's space, you see that just because you were born this way, you're bad, you're evil. There's no use for you. Talking on a podcast the other day, you're only able to stick around as long as you are useful to the group. As soon as I do not provide value to everyone else, I'm done. Where do I go for the resources? I don't have custody of my daughter. So I'm not going to qualify for any housing. Right? You're a man. Get it out the mud. Now you want me to be masculine. But we lead in homelessness. We die the quickest. We're paying into Social Security that most of us will never see. It's been like that forever. I think we lost another 3 years during COVID, so our life expectancy dropped another 3 years. We actually die more than women do with, what is that, breast cancer, with the pink. So the NFL wears pink in honor of breast cancer. We actually die in higher numbers for the cancers that we get, but we don't even advocate for our own cancers. Hell of a thing. Talk about that. There's a lot of pejorative words. Pookie Ray Ray is a fill-in for a shiftless, lazy, no good Black guy who is a homosexual. Ever heard that term, homosexual? I was a homosexual in my 20s. Remember, I emancipated myself at 17. I didn't have a job. I didn't have a place to go. I didn't have friends, family that I could stay with. So sex is what kept me housed. And you got to become good at it. But then it becomes part of the problem, right? Because that relationship is only temporary. And once she tires of the situation, or you tire of the situation, you've got to go somewhere else. Mental issues. I would tell you, I may be called a sellout for having this conversation and sharing the dirty laundry with the white community. I'm actually part of what's called the Black Collective here in Kitsap. So we have our issues. It's like the Hatfields and McCoys, if you will. It's a small town, generation after generation. People have beefs with each other. And then their kids have beef with each other. They don't even know why, but they just keep it going. We have sayings like the white man's ice water is colder. We don't support Black business. What the Black dollar is in our community for 6 seconds, I believe. I've been around for 5 years. Most Black people would tell you, oh, there was no Black nonprofits in Kitsap. They knew who I was. They knew what I did. Crabs in a barrel mentality. You probably heard that term. These things are hard to hear. And so what happens is you get other terminologies. MGTOW, men going their own way. SYSBM, save yourself, Black man. Why do I have to be a martyr for my community that doesn't care about me? That isn't going to support me? Matter of fact, the only time I'm really find justice impact. So if I'm coming out of jail or prison and I need help, and I'm in a society or the BIPOC community or black women can help, then they're there. BIMA had Kamante, what's his last name? Carter, right? He's out now. That's awesome. And it's a hell of a story. At the end of the day, there are so many black boys and young black men that have never committed a crime, especially one like that are sitting here in Kitsap County that have no support. There's no programming. There's no funding. The guy who had the birthday, he's one of those guys. He works with us sometimes. We try to stay connected to the family. But, like many black companies, we don't have that many employees. So we can't afford to hire him and pay him what he's worth. I would love for him to join the military, to get the hell out of Kitsap, because what's here for him? Stuck working fast food? Maybe going to OC. Actually, he tried that and wasn't that successful, right? College isn't for everyone, as they say. Or maybe not at that time when he was a little bit younger. So where are those programs? Where's that support? Where's the acknowledgement? Our cousins, our nephews, our brothers. That's why SYSBM, Save Your Community, Black Man. That's kind of the counter to Save Yourself, Black Man. Which says, hey, you know what? You need to take your place in leadership, and you need to help your community. You need to do whatever it takes. You need to be that martyr. It's not going to be fixed unless you do it. There's a lot of women in here. So you know the trigger word when you say, women are supposed to be submissive to a man. That's bad, right? But what does that actually mean, especially biblically? Does it mean the trigger word, submission, or does it mean cooperation? Does it mean that you don't have a voice? No. But we take these things this way, and we don't have the dialogue, or we don't have the conversation. So we can never move past it. So then you say, well, if you act right, then I can submit. Kind of a strange thing. So how do we save the community if we don't have the cooperation of our own women? How do we save the community if the prevailing thought in education, Dr. DeGruy and many other scholars, that's the prevailing thought? And so if you go into any institution across the country, you're going to be indoctrinated in that same conversation. And only by a fluke am I standing here today saying something that you probably never heard this before. How many of you, just by show of hands, have heard this kind of dialogue before? Is it shocking? Am I a deplorable human being? Does it seem fair? Is it logical? I mean my argument, not the situation. Flat blackness. It's a huge issue. What I have for you is a bunch of different resources for you. So there are some websites, and we're going to check out Dr. T. Hassan Johnson. He is a PhD down in California, and he has one of the very few Black masculinist programs. And we're going to check out the political agenda. But blackdemographics.com is a great place to look at Black statistics. They're updated in 2017. The CDC, Pew Research. We can look at these things here. A few books. that I would encourage you to read. An old one, Ralph Ellison, The Invisible Man. There are a ton up here, but this is one. And then Dr. Tommy Curry, The Man I, should be required reading for everyone. A couple videos here on the new Jim Crow from Democracy Now! But let's go ahead and take a look at the politics. So, what were we talking about for the midterm elections? Immigration, safety, voter suppression, right? That's always a big one, especially targeting the black community. We need to get out and vote. If our candidates, I put R in quotations, don't win, black men typically take the fault, right? But when you look at Trump being elected, when you go back and you look at the numbers, our numbers track. We still voted for Trump in the same pretty much percentile. White women voted for Trump. Hispanics voted for Trump. Asians voted for Trump. LGBT voted for Trump. But they weren't condemned. Now, there were some issues with family members canceling each other out. All right. So I'm going to read through these, and then we're going to look at a few. Family court reform. Education, affirmative action, targeted homelessness, targeted unemployment programs, law enforcement, intimate partner violence. Okay, if you look at the stats, domestic violence is almost equal, man to woman, woman to man. The difference is that when a woman hits a man, well, oftentimes she might use a weapon, but we can kind of survive that. But if a man hits a woman, we're men, right? Bone structure, we can do real damage. But the numbers are on par. The other thing that they don't talk about is proxy violence. So what happens? I'm dating a woman in the room, and your brother, because I broke up with you or you got mad at me, your brother comes and kicks my ass. Well, that's proxy violence, right? That's counted as man-on-man crime, but it was initiated because of a woman. But we don't count that. We don't look at that. And those scenarios happen all the time. Health. Targeted cancer campaigns, treatment and recognition, small business support, Social Security and life insurance family support. Again, most of us aren't going to see Social Security. I have degenerative disc and joint disease. I'm morbidly obese. I have sarcoidosis, which is a lung disease. I'll be 50 in January. What's the likelihood that I make it another 15 years? Now that's the reality. So I'm paying into a system that I'll never see. So what can be done? Paternity leave. Reverse voter disenfranchisement. Blackmail specific reparations for the transatlantic slave trade and the United Nations for genocide. So let's go into a few of these. Child custody. Put my glasses to read this. If you're able to suspend how you feel, these are emotional things. Married couple, love each other, they bring a child into the world, they're both parenting, and hey, it doesn't work out, there's a divorce. And it doesn't automatically go 50-50. Why? That's not even logical. Mandatory paternity testing at birth. There's actually a really high percentage of men who believe they're the father and they're not. I think it's in the teens or somewhere. That's high, right? You think you're bringing a child into the world and it's not your child. The problem is if you put your name in that birth certificate and you find out years later, most states, it would take a miracle for that to be reversed. Your intention was to take care of that child, so now you're on the hook. That's how it is for a lot of men. Not just black men, but men. There's no repercussion for that. Right? The destruction, the emotional damage, the trauma. Nothing happens to the mother. Oh well. How does he move on from that? Reinstating at-fault divorces, termination of the parental obligation. Now this one is a big one. Many in this state for sure, my body, my choice. I agree with that. I hosted a panel for the Human Rights Conference last weekend. And one of the panelists, woman, said, hey, I'm against abortion, but I'm for your right to choose. And I'm like, you need to come on the podcast and have this conversation, right? Because that's actually how I feel, right? I'm actually against abortion, but I am for your right to choose. Especially when I hear things like, abort all black male babies. But if she has the right to terminate the pregnancy, should the man not have the right to financially abort? Should he be on the hook for 18 years for a child that he doesn't want? Like, really close your eyes and think of the logic in that. She wasn't ready to be a mother. Whatever the decision was that she decided to make to not be a parent, the man does not get that option. Oh, it was a one-night stand. Well, you had a baby. Take care of your responsibility. We don't say that to the mothers. That might not sound good, but do you think that would craft behavior if there wasn't a golden parachute that said, hey, well, you know what? If you have a child and that man doesn't want anything to do with that child, you're not going to just get a check for the rest of the child's life from 0 to 18. Regardless of whether he pays or how much it is or whatever, right? If you're watching the news, Kanye is paying $200,000 a month to Kim Kardashian. They're both allegedly billionaires. Why the hell would he pay child support to her? That's insanity. But that's how the system is created. And we just go along with it. But we don't see how destructive that is. So when this man, because everyone understands that housing is a crisis, right? There's no affordable housing. You need to make $30, $40 an hour, work 2 and 3 jobs just to pay the rent. Home ownership really isn't a realism for you, especially in this county. So he had a baby in his 20s. He's paying child support. They're garnishing his check at 25, 45, 50%. They take his driver's license if he doesn't pay. They take his passport. They took mine. I have it back now. So how am I supposed to go to work if you take my driver's license? Make that make sense? You put me in jail so I lose my job, a great job that I had, where I was barely making it. But I need first, last, and deposit. I need 3 times the rent. I need a good rental history. How am I supposed to get that? Where am I supposed to go? Oh, well, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Maybe you should go to college. Where's the grants? Where's the scholarships? Everybody's in line to get student loan relief. 10 grand, 20 grand. Most people lost their mind when that came off the table. So it makes sense how black men can be the most homeless. See, these things start to track. And I know this is a really hard one. Financial abortion for the case of female stealthing. I'll wrap up. Oh, I got like 10 more minutes. The Q&A's at 1, right?
Anytime you want.
Okay. Anytime I want. I could do this all day. I'm like Captain America. Drake had an Instagram model over. And, you know, they had their fun. And he took a condom in the bathroom and poured hot sauce in it. And she tried to pour the semen inside of her, and it burned her. That was all over social media for a while. And the conversation was, well, man, maybe she could sue him and charge him. But she was trying to basically get the golden parachute, steal his semen, get pregnant, and Drake would owe child support. She's paid, right? For Drake, that might have been 40 grand a month, something ridiculous. So this is a thing. And yes, men do it too, right? But we're not having that conversation today. Because typically when we have these conversations, like, well, men do it too. Well, what about this? But we never have this conversation. You shared yourself. You never heard these things. This dialogue. That's scary. Child support value system. We advocate for instituting a system where goods, services, and time spent with the child should be calculated and valued at a dollar amount. Anything remaining. Also, child support should be capped at $2,500 per child, regardless. You know, before I met my ex-wife, she had to pay her rent, she had to cook, she had to pay her bills. We got married. We did what we did. But somehow I'm supposed to be responsible to keep her at the level of the life that she was at before, or when we were together. Men don't typically recover from that. And if you get divorced more than once, it's tough. You heard of gray divorce? We're watching a lot of older people getting divorced. Stallone just went through, his wife filed and then took it back. A lot of older people filing for divorce. It's tough. And can't make back what he did during that time. We can only rebuild ourselves so many times. So right to a lifestyle. Does not the man deserve the lifestyle that he had before? We can't change these laws because if we even talk about it, we're misogynist. It's toxic masculinity, just for me uttering this. The dialogue, it's the conversation. But I can't change it. Actually, the women would have to change it. Because it's a gynocracy. When the system is set up, although it's ran by men to make laws that support women. All right, a few more here. Another one I'll just share. If you've ever been a non-custodial parent and you have weekends or however that looks. When you play out a school-age child's day, you wake the child up, get here, get them ready for school. They're in school from 7 to 3. They're in bed by 8. But it's calculated as though that mother or the custodial parent is with that child every minute of the day, right? That's why it's so high. But the non-custodial parent doesn't have those supports because if they only have the weekend, then you need to engage because that's the only time you have with your daughter. That's how it ends up being the fun time parent, right? Because you're doing activities, you're going places. And then a custodial parent can become resentful. It's like, I've got to take care of all the business and you get to go out and have all the fun. Well, the fun costs money. And I'd actually like to do some of the other things too. Because believe it or not, it is a respite when they're in bed at 8:30. And I can get some things done. Or they're at school. about the educational things, and I gave you a few examples. Targeted homelessness programs, especially post-incarceration, Black men should be prioritized for housing. They don't take our vouchers. I work with a lot of Black men. They work. They don't make 3 times rent, like I said before, so they couch surf. They're homosexuals. They're staying with their mothers. They're staying with other family members. But when that relationship fizzles, now they're somewhere else. And that is, if you're couch surfing, you are considered homeless. Housing is not secure. You also don't learn how to manage your own housing. Where do you get those skills? You're walking on eggshells the entire time. If I do something wrong, if I say something wrong, I'm out. That person can be abusive. Doesn't matter. I need you to take me to work. I need you to watch the kids. I need you to do this. I need you to do that. Okay. Same with unemployment programs. Criminal sentencing reform. I don't think anyone talks about this. Black men should be arrested and sentenced to no greater degree than any other members of race who committed the same crime. I'm actually big on justice. If you do something wrong, you should do the time. But you should do the time that everybody does. And that goes for men and women. Doesn't matter. We look at Chicago and all the murders, all the shootings, and these things aren't being addressed, right? Talking about everything else. Oh, we're so helpless. People in the community don't want to speak out. But these were your babies. How does your child, how does your boy, who was born from 0 to 9, was just so cute, and all of a sudden, 10 to 13, now is a hellion, drug dealer and a murderer and everything else? What happened? What happened? How do we deal with that? Not the symptom, but the disease. And I would submit to you, it's men aren't in the home. But how can they be? That's not what we're doing today. We're doing something else. And, it frustrates me sometimes. I'm in spaces where I hear about folks in the BIPOC community talk about dismantle the patriarchy in traditional families, and then they go home to their husband. I was like, wow, how hypocritical is that? So you tell us, oh, go girl, go queen, you're strong, you're independent, you don't need no man. You go home to your man. Generational wealth, something to pass on. Life insurance, not doing GoFundMes. There's an accident or a death before their time. It's offensive. And you just have to sit and take it, because if you say anything, you're not coming back to that room. And you'll be quietly frozen out. Can't wait to see what happens to me after this. All right. We are almost at time, so I'm going to stop it here and open it up for questions and comments. The form here has all the information that I just shared, especially for those on Zoom, with the links, which you can also get the Black Male Agenda. I do have one copy up here if you want it. There's a lot more to this. I could do an hour on every topic up here. One of the things I'd like to do is start there's a League of Women Voters here. I want to start a League of Black Male Voters in Kitsap County, so our voices can be heard. Now, the things on this list don't seem toxic, don't seem damaging to the community, don't seem unfair. And we might disagree to the degree of how these things work, but no one is talking about this. But this is how we feel, and no one listens to us. All right. Questions, comments, thoughts? That's kind of heavy. Should I dance?
Just thank you for sharing. That was really interesting. just want to say that this is a really good reminder of how everything is connected, and it's starting in one place and starting to follow the path or unpeel the onion or whatever metaphor you want to use that is really provocative. And I think that we have models, like you were saying, there are models that have been put out that we are more familiar with, language that we are more familiar with, but the fact is that all of this is happening at the same time, and I think that where people start to get overwhelmed is they feel like, oh God, it's all happened, it's all connected, I don't even know where to begin. And I think that I appreciate the challenge that you have issued, and I know that not everybody agrees on all of this, but the fact that this is happening, it's real, it's really appreciated.
I appreciate that. What's interesting is we don't all agree with the prevailing thought that's out there, right? But you have the power to not agree with everything that I'm saying. I don't have that power the other way. Thoughts? What's going through your mind?
Me and my husband talk about a lot of the inequality between straight up men and women. Always. The leading, the highest numbers of suicide is men. Nobody talks about it.
Facts.
And my husband is really, really upset. He's white, and he is always, really vocal about how there's no support group for him. He's not allowed to say anything because he's a privileged white man. I don't know.
Yeah, 100%.
I don't have to think about it.
Well, how do we find a way to acknowledge what this country has done, right? To say it's the original sin, or maybe the indigenous people is the original sin. And say, okay, things have to change. There are systems and there are institutions that need to be dismantled. But not at the expense of demonizing white men to the point where they're just going to retreat and harden themselves off, right? So what are you seeing? Right, when Obama was elected, I think they said, right-wing radical hate groups increased by 400% or 4,000%. So where are we at now, right? You're bad just because of your chromosome. Now, you have to own your part in it, but black men have to own their part in it. Black women have to own their part in it, right? You have to dismantle these institutions and these systems, all of us. And yes, there is a caste society that we're in. And so we do have to acknowledge that. But we can do both at the same time. Because ultimately we got to work together. If you are a believer, right? It's going to be a black heaven, and a white heaven, and an Asian heaven, or it's going to be heaven for everyone. That makes it. I don't know, can we do it? We can do both. I think we have to. And we control it. Never ran a nonprofit. Never run a podcast. YouTube. Just watch YouTube. It's been 2 years. 800 videos. Have the audacity. Have the unmitigated goal, as Stephen A. Smith likes to say on his video, to make a difference, make a change. To have these conversations. Dialogue. This isn't hate speech. Perspectives. You hear all the time, the black community, we're not a monolith. We're not a monolith, right? Neither are white people. We're Hispanics. There's white Democrats, there's white Republicans, there's white independents, right? But somehow it's glaring when it comes to us that we can't think differently. And we have to go along and get along, and if we don't, then we're sellouts and coons and everything else. thinking with the red scarf? I love scarves.
I think all the time. And I appreciate your perspective. And I learned homosexual, which I never heard of before, so thank you for that. I think that we have to come up with another word other than privilege, because when you talk to white people, and we talk to them on the ferry a lot when people talk about white privilege, everybody automatically thinks you're talking about money. And white people will say, well, I don't have any money, I'm not privileged. But they don't realize that when I wake up in the morning, I don't have to worry about driving in any neighborhood I want to drive in. I don't have to worry about going to any store, not being followed by the security guard. They don't realize what privilege is. They automatically think that it's money and it's value. And that's not what I believe white privilege is. I wish we had another term for white privilege so that white people could understand the advantages that we have that others don't have. And we have to look after each other.
I guess the only thing I would say to that is we're all intelligent people. You know, on my podcast, if I talk about really serious things, I say, hey, you know what? We can all be intellectually honest, right? We're going to suspend our emotion. We're not going to, create red herrings or straw man arguments. We're going to listen to what is being said and not listening to respond, but listening to understand, right? So if we are intellectually honest, then you can say, hey, there's white privilege that exists. Now let's explore how you have white privilege regardless of your financial status in this country. I have a transportation company, and I'm going to use the word because I hate when the news says, well, a teacher said the N-word. I say the word. One of our clients in a wheelchair, alcoholic, would defecate on himself. Very mean person. Understandably. He would call my black drivers nigger. And even in his state, he still wasn't black in his mind. It's a hard one to take. It's like, you're really calling me that? Okay. So I think we just have to be intellectually honest. What does privilege look like? Your name on a job application. It happens. They're trying to dismantle affirmative action. Black women are the most educated in this country, right? But everything is still, black women need to go into STEM. There's a pay wage disparity. But we don't look at the truth of the wage disparity, right? I know I sound like a right-winger. But if you're not in those positions and jobs that pay the higher wage, and you're in office jobs, are you supposed to get paid $80,000 to $100,000 a year to sit in the office or to be an orator? I mean, when you adjust for that, the chasm isn't so. But we can't have that conversation. Most people won't even look at the stats. So if we could do that, we could say, okay, yes, do we need to get more black women and black men into STEM fields? Yes. But we also have to look at how we got there. Part of it was through civil rights was getting access, get your education, and get a government job. Well, they might get furloughed this week. Right? So if you're not a construction worker or a business owner, you're not going to make the same. That's true. I'm going to be in social justice studies. It doesn't pay. Teacher doesn't pay. I agree that we should pay our athletes. We should pay our teachers like we pay our athletes. We should pay our firefighters and our police like we pay our athletes. We're going to get it pretty quick. In the back, you are pondering. You have the pondering chin on the hand. What do you think? suffer when we go through it. But they call black women who support black men and want to be in union and in marriage, they call them pick-me's. And it's a pejorative. Again, if you believe the Bible, you know, women was here as a helpmate to the man. But that's a pejorative, right? In our community. It's not an honor to stay home and take care of the kids, or, I mean, most people now, it doesn't matter where you're at. Both heads of the household are going to have to go to work to survive. But yeah, it's derogatory. You can't be a helpmate. You got to be strong, independent, and alone. And I've had a lot of my friends say, man, I got sold a bill of goods. I was supposed to be strong. I don't need no man. And when it gets tough, man, kind of need a man. Wish I had a man to do these things, to have that confidant, to have that support, to have that leadership, to have that counsel. And I mean man, not male. Because we're intellectually honest, right? Not a male. There are a lot of males out here that have children that aren't good parents, that aren't good fathers, that aren't good people. How about a man? Is there anything in the chat?
No.
All right. Well, let's see. Got a question, you got a thought?
I'm just trying to mull it over. I mean, there's so much truth that you spoke. There's so much that I see. And I have even experience here. On the island, down the street from where I work, getting bad and all. I think what I want to know is where do we move forward in acknowledging inherited traumas? You know, I think we have done a lot of damage to the last 4 generations and the next 2 with inherited traumas and prejudice. And it's like, where does that stop? How do we change that?
Starts with that temerity, that unmitigated goal, the audacity to speak your voice, to speak your mind. And for us to stand in solidarity, the way that black women do, they're awesome. Black women are awesome. They're awesome, right? They're powerful.
And funny.
All of the above, they're fantastic. They have a way to galvanize and support even while navigating their own traumas. The blueprint is already there. We just have to start doing it, which means that we have to be in communion with each other as men, and that we have to be in communion with our women, right? And say, I need to be heard. You love me. I'm your son. I'm your brother. I'm your cousin. I'm your nephew. I'm your father. Please hear me. I'm hurting. I think that's where it started. Did you?
Yeah, I was just curious what spaces you feel like are safe to be able to do that. What kind of
There is a safe space. So this is the first time I've done this. Yes. And originally when I was working on this, I was just going to talk about just the black male political agenda. I wasn't going to go into all the other things. But what I recognized is I had this very unique opportunity of Bainbridge Island, of all places, to launch this as a tipping point, right? And there's no leadership here to sequester me or to push me down or to say what-aboutism or, not all. And now it lives. And now it's been recorded. So now it will go out. And hopefully that will stimulate others to have dialogue. There are men's groups that exist, and we talk in our little circles, but it doesn't go beyond that. And even then, because it's a gynocracy, right? There's still a lot of, I love my mother. Don't talk bad about black women. Don't do this, don't do. So we can't We can't even just say how it is and how we're feeling. Our feelings aren't even validated. But this is the first time. And like I said, I want to create a space for Black male voters. That's why I cover city council meetings. I'm on the audit committee as of 2 weeks ago. I got voted in for the city of Bremerton. So I want to understand the money. But more than that, I want to share out that knowledge. The knowledge isn't for me. The knowledge is we the people, right? That's how this country was built, we the people. So I need to get in and get the information and share it out. That's really what the conduit is about. I guess I'll end it. That's it.
Thank you so much for your time here today. I just want to say that we're super fortunate to have you here and have this conversation. I think that we a lot of times talk about, sitting with the discomfort of something or being bold about a conversation, and I think you just demonstrated how to be a listener and how to be a receiver of somebody's truth, and that's the foundation that we want to be building our community on. So thank you so much.
And that's hard, right? Because cancel culture is a thing. I'm just not afraid to be canceled anymore. They try to do that. So I'm at a space where it's whatever, right? Come on, bring it on.
Yeah, well, thank you so much.
But, and just lastly, you've seen me out here because I've been invited to cover events for BIMA. Whether it was Johnny Carter or the march that you did to the movie theater, right? And while I might not agree with the exaltation of that, my job is still to support, right? It's not a zero-sum game. I can't not support that and then not advocate for what I believe and how I feel also, right? I can do both. Just do both, right? So the best way to do that is to not talk it, but to walk it. So let's be walking. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. So that was my presentation yesterday at the Bainbridge Island Museum of Arts. I do appreciate them for having me in the space and able to share that. As I was saying, that wasn't by design for me to have that presentation there, but the opportunity presented itself. And these are some things that I was exploring for 2023. And as I was saying, the advice that I was given to a friend earlier was don't wait. And that last piece that I put in the chat there was a correction. I did present this in the summertime, something similar to this, to two Black men here in the county to get their feedback and thoughts on the Black male political agenda piece of it, right? And starting a league of Black male voters. So look forward to that coming up. And, again, even in that, Black men themselves aren't a monolith in regards to what is important to us. There are a lot of different things that are important to us. But our voices need to be heard. And the only way that our voices are going to be heard is if we use our voices, right? And get past the point of only using our voices to support the prevailing thought, which is good too. And like I said, does not have to be a zero-sum game. However, in the Black community, it seems as though we are required to not only lift our own voices, but we must lift every other person or interest voices also. So whether it's LGBT or immigration, whatever it may be, we're required to do that. Now, the flip side of that is that's not typically done on the other side. So when the other groups advocate for their issues, they're advocating for their issues. And there is no requirement or expectation for them to cape for Black issues. And what I would say is, well, police brutality isn't exactly a black issue. Access to voting isn't just a black issue. But some of these things are. Some of these things are. Now, as you can see in the chat below, type your comments, your questions, and as I understand, this can be one of these conversations where, hey, you're not in a position not to get canceled. So it's better for you not to say anything in the chat. So I hope this is food for thought for folks. I hope that people can be intellectually honest. I hope that people can suspend their own hyper emotional reaction to what is being said and actually listen to the words. Folks often say, put yourself in the other person's shoes. We really don't want to take our own shoes off to do that. Take off your shoes. Put my shoes on. Put the shoes on of the 10,000 plus men that have signed on to that black man's political agenda. Ellen's DJ or executive producer just committed suicide, 40 years old. 40. Please understand suicide awareness and prevention, 888-910-0416, or go to imhurting.org to get emotional support during times of crisis. This is the holidays. Everyone is welcome to talk about what's causing them to feel pain. Crisis counselors will listen to you without judgment and help you feel cared about and safe. The holidays is a really hard time. You've got COVID and RSV and flu and upper respiratory things going on. You have unaffordable housing. You have stretched resources from institutions because of COVID. So everyone is trying to look out for themselves, right? Many people are treading water right now. So it's hard to tread water and throw a lifeline to you at the same time. We have inflation. So if you're feeling slighted, or if you're feeling like, oh, I'm a sellout, or I shouldn't be saying those things, understand there are so many nephews and uncles and fathers and grandfathers and brothers and sons that are feeling this way, that are suffering in silence, that don't have a voice in their families, not even with the men that they commune with, because we've been taught to be hard, to just suck it up, man up. We're seeing the apathy that is happening. Well, not just black men, but just men in general. Religion is down. People aren't excited about volunteering to serve in the military. Lying flat was a thing, right? This is a problem, and it needs to be addressed. And the only way we can do that is if we're going to start having the dialogue. And I'll say one of the most frustrating things that I see is, as I end this, for liberals, there was a time where you felt like the Republicans were bullies. You know, the whole, and I would use the example, right, with liberals. But you felt like they were bullies. And what I see from liberals, from the woke left, is now they have become the bullies that they hated, which is usually what happens. This isn't the right canceling people. It's the left. It's the liberals. And so while you social justice folks raise your hands and make space and want healing and all of the different things, be wary of the people that you have locked out of that conversation. Be wary of who you've locked out of that conversation. Because when you're looking at the brass tacks of things, when you go back to slavery, there were white men and there were white women. And it wasn't that they were forced to go along to get along. That was a choice. Many white women had slaves, inherited the family's estates through Jim Crow. You can see the Sisters of the Confederate. You can ask the question, who sewed the robes? Clan robes. Little kids' robes. See, women are the first teachers. But somehow, through feminism, we've all been indoctrinated to men are bad, patriarchy is bad. But see, black men didn't have that position to operate in the patriarchy. Because the white man and the white woman were the slave masters. And somehow now in this conversation, we've been hurt by it, as if we were slave masters ourselves. As if we participated in Jim Crow ourselves. As if we weren't the Emmett Tills. As if we weren't suffering from the modern day lynchings. Like Chris Brown at the award show for the Michael Jackson celebration and being taken off. That's what systemic racism, institutionalized racism is. Did he do something bad? Yeah, probably like 10 years ago. But you have men and women in your families that have done things bad, that continue to do things bad, that continue to profit off of those things. And they are forgiven. Black people are supposed to reject their people. Now, I'm not going to defend R. Kelly in the least, but his music was great. But no one has said, hey, Elvis was married to a 14-year-old. And you need to cancel his music. and deplatform it. We don't do that. Tucker Carlson, Alex Jones, all the incendiary, racist things that have been made. They didn't take their bank accounts like they did to Ye. Modern day tar and feathering. And if you can do it to one of the richest black men in this country, it sends a hell of a message that the rest of you Negroes better not get out of line. Because we'll shut you off too. If we can do it to him, we can destroy you. So we'll take your brand deals, Adidas, or Adidas as we call them. German brothers. Go do the research. German company. And they have the nerve, the audacity to cancel Ye. It's the last thing I'll say here, because this is about black men. You know, Deion Sanders just left his HBCU to coach Colorado. One of the biggest issues we have in the black community is tearing each other down. Now, I tell you like it is. I consider myself right now the Nat Turner of Kitsap County. So if you do or you say something that is against the collective, I'm going to call it out. I don't care who you are. I don't care how long you've been doing the work. I don't care what your contribution has been to the community. I'm calling it out. So don't let it get to me. However, when people do good things, that has to be called out too, with the same energy. And what Deion has done at that HBCU, was miraculous. 25-5, going undefeated in his last year, taking 4 or 5 coaches with him to Colorado, getting all of the endorsements, shining a spotlight on HBCU football. These are all net positives. And you have presidents of these HBCUs tearing him down. You know, we had a saying that, white racist people break their tools when they're done. So those that are kind of the defectors and do the bidding of the far right, they have their day in the sun. But when you look at it, who out of our black heroes has not been destroyed? Malcolm, Martin. So many have been murdered. Michael Jackson, Prince, have all been vilified. Bill Cosby. People can reach back 40-something years and levy accusations. And the country will follow through on that. But we don't see that same justice for other groups. Tiger Woods, even Jordan, through the gambling. Everybody has their day. You even had, as I was saying, black women divestors talking about black men are bullet bags and abort black male babies. Some of these same women, and some men too, were having conversations on how Martin Luther King wasn't great. He supposedly cheated on his wife and this and that. So they couldn't respect what he's done because he cheated on his wife. So they just discounted his whole legacy. You know how disgusting that sounds on its face? But that's what we do. And the mainstream media would have you believe that all those are Russian bots. When you can go to Clubhouse, Reddit, well, let's not say Reddit, Clubhouse, YouTube, you can watch black women saying these things. Prominent. Those with hundreds of thousands of followers. And read the comments. And so the reason why I thought that was a perfect place is so many of our allies, they only deal with a certain faction of black people. See, we're like a 20-sided dice. And other social justice folks and other BIPOC people that are doing good work, they only deal with one side of the black community. And it tends to be the justice impacted community that's trying to do right, advocate. Tends to be the middle class and upper middle class black folks, clergy, larger organizations, or ones that make them look good by being alongside them and patting them on the head and saying, good job. And then they say, see, look what we did. Give us more money. 20-sided die. When so many of us live in poverty, and not the federal poverty line, but below that line. And I wonder if you would be so inclined to help and to assist. I don't want to stay on too late, but one of the things that I bumped into the other day was the racial breakdown of reparations for black people. It was horrible. Oh, I found it right here. Let me pull this up before I end. So, I always wonder, how much are you really allies? Black and white Americans are far apart in their views for reparations for slavery. This was written, not even 3 weeks ago, November 28th, by Carrie Blunzina and Kiana Cox. Discussions about atonement for the enslavement of black Americans have a long history in the United States. And efforts toward reparations for slavery and racial discrimination have moved forward in some places in recent years. In 2021, Evanston, Illinois became the first city to create a reparations plan for its black residents. And California that year set up its nation's first state-level reparations task force. Earlier this year, Harvard University created a $100 million legacy of slavery fund. That's laughable. To allow scholars and students to examine the university's connections to slavery. We're just going to acknowledge, just going to examine it. And who's examining it? Americans view the prospect of reparations mostly negatively. 2021 Pew Research Center survey found that 3 in 10 U.S. adults say descendants of people enslaved in the U.S. should be repaid in some way, such as given land or money. About 7 in 10, 68%, say those descendants should not be repaid. 70%. But your allies? Views of reparations for slavery were very widely by race and ethnicity. especially between black and white Americans. Around 3/4 of black adults, 77%, say that descendants of people enslaved in the U.S. should be repaid in some way, while 18% of white Americans say the same. 18%. Yeah, sit with that for a minute. There are also notable differences by partisan affiliation. Among Democrats and the Democratic-leaning independents, views are split. 48% say descendants of enslaved people should be repaid in some way, while 49% say they should not be repaid. Wait. Did that just say that even Democrats are split 50-50? So it's not that it's a Republican versus a Democrat thing. Oh, no. Half of Democrats are like, nah, we're wow. While 49 say they shouldn't be repaid. By comparison, only 8% of Republicans and GOP leaners say these descendants should be repaid in some way, and 91% say they should not. So not even 10% of Republicans say there should be reparations. When it comes to age, younger adults are more likely than older adults to say that descendants of enslaved people should be repaid. 45% of adults under 30 take this view, compared to 18% of adults 65 or older. Now, what's interesting is the older you are, the closer you were to either folks that have been enslaved, right? Because late in the 1900s, there were still people alive, or the grandsons and the granddaughters. But the older they are, the less likely they are to say you should pay reparations. When Americans are asked about the legacy of slavery's effect on black people today, 58% of the overall public say that this affects the position of black people in America. It's almost 60%. Society, at least a fair amount, with 28% saying it affects them a great deal. 4 in 10 U.S. adults say the legacy of slavery has not much or not at all affected the position of black Americans in this country today. As with views of reparations, racial ethnic differences on this question are notable. Black Americans are 85% more likely than Hispanic, at 64%, and 50% for white Americans to say legacy of slavery affects the position of black people in the U.S. A fair amount or a great deal. These are our allies. These are BIPOC. The partisan gap on this question is also wide. More than 8 in 10 Democrats, 82%, say the legacy of slavery affects black people in the U.S., a fair amount or a great deal. More than 50 percentage points greater than the share of Republicans who said 29%. Black Americans are much more likely to identify with or lean toward the Democratic Party. Only about 1 in 10 black voters identify or lean toward the Republican Party. As of 2020, white voters are slightly more evenly split, but the GOP has an advantage, 53-42. So again, there's still more white Republicans than there are white Democrats. And this is the breakdown here, right? White, 48%, net, not much at all, a great deal. 50 say a great deal, 49% say, or 48% say, meh. 33% Hispanic say, nah, it doesn't really. 20% of Asians, not much at all. I'll put this in the chat if you want to read it. This is a Pew Research poll here. Fascinating read. Just have to be careful what people say to you in your face and when they're around you, and then how they vote. That's how we were so off, right? People, when Trump was elected, so many people were surprised because in the polls it was like, oh, no, 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 no. And then when it came to it, that's what you got. All right, I'm going to wrap it here. This was the Share, Learn, and Grow from the Bainbridge Island Museum of Arts. Again, thanks to them, thanks to Kristen and to Quincy for getting me set up. I was glad to do it. Hope to do it again. If you do want this information, you can reach out the Conduit Podcast show at gmail.com, and I will send you all of the documents that I used to prepare this and the Black Man Political Agenda. As I shared with them, I didn't get a chance to go over most of this. There's some stats on Black marriage and interracial marriage and define all of the vocabulary words. Since I only had an hour, there was quite a bit that I didn't get to. But if you want this document, just reach out to me and I will send that to you. All right. Well, with that, I am going to take my Mucinex and lay down. I am Marwan Cameron. This is The Conduit.